My son took my glasses so I wouldn't see the documents, but I see further than he thinks. He plucked them off my nose with a little laugh. Smudged again, Mom. Let me clean them. The glasses slipped into his pocket, and a neat stack of papers appeared on my kitchen table. Blue flags fluttered like tiny ocean waves. It's just paperwork to help us help you, and he said. Sign here and here. The kettle clicked off, and the house fell painfully quiet. Even without my glasses, I could make out the bold words at the top, durable power of attorney, but not the fine print. He slid a pen toward me, turning pages like someone who had practiced. Victoria stood behind him, arms folded, eyes flicking to my checkbook by the sugar bowl. I'm not blind, I said. Of course not, he answered quickly. Too quickly. You've just been forgetful. You left the oven on Tuesday. I was baking bread, I said. You ate it warm with butter. He didn't blink. Banks need clarity. Doctors too. This will make everything smoother. He tapped the flags again, salesman's rhythm. We'll move you into our downstairs suite. Your own bathroom. No stairs. The room smelled of lemon oil and the starch I'd pressed into the tablecloth that morning. My hands stayed steady on the china cup. I looked at the pages, at the date, prepared last month, and then at my son's face. Open, almost tender, like a man coaxing a nervous animal. How could my own son believe I would hand over my life between sips of tea? He reached for my hand. We love you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, I won't, I said. And I meant it, just not in the way he hoped. I could feel the outline of my phone in my cardigan pocket, warm against my ribs, recording every word. The spare readers in the sewing basket waited 3 steps away. The letter from Dr. Rao, declaring me fully competent, sat sealed in the top drawer. The trust Richard and I set up years ago, the one they don't know exists, has been waiting like a buried seed. They think the weak spot is my eyesight. It isn't. Leave the papers, I told him, sliding the pen back. I never sign anything I haven't read twice. He smiled then, the patient smile of someone convinced he's already won. That's the thing about people who underestimate you. They show you where to strike. They had no idea I'd been preparing for this day ever since the first time a key went missing, and they insisted I'd misplaced it. But to understand how it came to this moment, my own child trying to blindfold me with love, I have to start at the beginning. Richard has been gone 3 years. I still turn toward the garage when I hear a car door slam, expecting the rhythm of his steps, the way he'd place his hands on my shoulders and kiss the back of my head. He was an accountant who never forgot a number but often forgot his umbrella. Fair, cautious, steady. When we're old, he said, we should plan for our best selves, not our worst fears. So we met with an attorney, a quiet woman with sharp sleeves, who walked us through trusts, powers, and the brittle politics of families who love each other and then break apart. We set up a living trust with a corporate trustee as co-pilot, a way to keep the house and savings pointed exactly where we wanted them if anything happened. Richard died in the spring, a daffodil month. The trust went quiet, like a switch flipped off after the wires were safely in place. Michael began helping me with boxes and ladders and Christmas lights. Victoria brought soups. I let them, as much for their comfort as for mine. Grief makes people want to feel useful. But within a year, small things began to tilt. First, my pill organizer. I label everything, flower bins, freezer bags, even button jars. I count my pills every Sunday. One Monday, I opened the box and Tuesday was gone. Not the pills. The day. The whole little square. A chunk of plastic missing as if a mouse had chewed it. You must have lost it, Victoria laughed, dropping a new organizer on the counter. I frowned, then let it go. I told myself grief does strange things to the edges of a life. Then came the stove. I found the right front burner hissing under a cold skillet after I returned from the garden. Michael's text arrived an hour later. Don't scare us like that, Mom. I explained about the rosemary I'd clipped, the phone call that delayed me, the fact that I turned the knob to off with my own hand. We went in circles. He sighed and asked if he could install a camera over the back door for my safety. It clicked red at night. and I had to close the curtains to keep it from blinking on my dreams. These were bothers, not alarms, until my bank called to confirm a change in my contact information. The new email was a mash of my name with numbers I didn't recognize. "I didn't request that," I said, and the woman on the phone used a voice trained to sound both gentle and strong. We corrected it and set a note on the account. The next day, Michael stopped by just to check in and asked, as casually as a weather report, if the bank had given me any trouble with online access lately. "They're so picky," he said, smiling. "I know a guy who can help if you need it." That night, I took Richard's tie pin, the simple gold bar he'd worn for 30 years, out of my jewelry box and pinned it to the inside of my cardigan. He had given it to me to hold after the funeral, and I wore it to keep him close. I took a small screwdriver from the junk drawer and slid out the tiny camera I'd had installed last winter after a break-in 2 streets over. It's the size of a lima bean, meant for bird watchers. I tucked it behind the bar so the pin looked ordinary. The feed went to an app on my phone. I named the device Sparrow and set it to record whenever it heard voices over the kitchen table. If this sounds like paranoia, understand that paranoia runs out of energy. Mine was a different animal. It was attention. Dr. Rao humored me when I requested a full cognitive evaluation. "You do crosswords," she said, flipping through her forms. "And you organized half our vaccine clinic last fall." I told her I wanted a letter, not a certificate of youth, just a clear statement of my current competence. She tapped her pen against the paper, then wrote what I asked in her firm script. "This doesn't mean you're proving anything to anyone," she said. "It means you're comfortable with facts." I mailed myself a copy and loaded another into the cloud backup my niece Elena had set up for me. The next 3 weeks were a lesson in patience. I went about my life. I banged salt from my winter boots on the back step, cleaned the crowns off the grandkids' construction paper kings after Epiphany, and cooked a pot roast for Sunday. When Michael came by, I told him about the birds at the feeder. When Victoria complimented the taste of the carrots, I asked if she'd like to take some home. When the oven mystery resurfaced, I said nothing. I was tired of putting out a fire that had never been lit by me. By then, Sparrow had captured 3 conversations. 2 were small, the third was not. "I'll handle the bank," Michael said in that recording, his voice deeper and flatter than the one he uses with me. "She gets babied by that manager. Someone has to push them. And the doctor?" "Victoria." A clink of ice in a glass. "She's not going to keep passing these ridiculous tests. She's 72. "My grandmother was 72 and still sold real estate," Victoria said. "You're rushing. We need every signature before tax season." "Don't," he lowered his voice. "Don't say before tax season when we're in the house." "Then don't leave the burner on," she snapped. I thought maybe she'd blink and just accept it. I do not have time for her to come to her senses. I sat alone at the table and listened twice. The night outside the window was a deep bowl. I heard the clock tick. I poured myself cold coffee and drank it without even a sugar cube to sweeten it. In the morning, I took the bus downtown to see an attorney. Her name was Claire Nguyen. She wore her hair in a glossy knot and shoes that didn't announce themselves. Her receptionist had said she specialized in elder law. And that phrase had pricked me like I was a topic. Claire did not speak to me like a topic. She asked questions, and she didn't interrupt the answers. "How long have you been sensing pressure from them?" she asked after she took notes on the trust Richard and I had created. "A year," I said. "Little things. A missing key, a camera I didn't ask for, food moved, my checkbook misplaced, and then found somewhere it shouldn't be. And the stove?" "The stove," I said. And then something broke in my voice that embarrassed me because it was a common thing, a knob. "Yes, the stove," she nodded. "Do not apologize." People who make you doubt yourself always choose small things. They're easier to deny. She slid a page toward me. A plan, not a petition. "This gives us layers. First, secure your finances. Second, document everything. Third, set up witnesses for anything that might look like you need help but is actually interference. Fourth, prepare for court even if we never go." And if we do, if they file for guardianship, we meet them in court with what they've given us, their own words and their own actions. On the bus home, I watched 3 young women fall asleep, each with her head tipped in a different direction like flowers on one stem. The city slurred by the windows. I thought of the grandkids, Lila's careful braids, Ben's serious questions about the moon, and I wondered what they would remember of these years. Would they remember my garden carrots or their parents' whispered arguments in the car? Would they remember my hands steady on a teacup or a pen pushed across a table? I changed the locks, legally. Claire sent a letter, politely formal, alerting Michael and Victoria that the house's legal ownership was held by the trust and any modifications required trustee consent, which did not include them. She also sent notices to the bank and to Dr. Rao's office authorizing them to share information with Claire and Elena as my designated contacts. It was a soft wall, not a fortress, but it meant that when Michael called pretending to be me, and he would, he'd collide with more than a security question. The next Sunday, I invited them to dinner. I made chicken with olives and lemon, the dish Michael likes from his childhood. Victoria arrived with a salad nobody ate. The kids crashed into my arms in a way that flushed my eyes with heat. We talked about Ben's science project and Lila's recital. Michael asked about the boiler and then about my email. Casual as a cat. I smiled and told him Elena had fixed everything. Elena? Victoria repeated, her voice turning the name into a problem. Elena, I said. You've met her at Christmas. She does computer systems for the hospital now. Michael stabbed a lemon in his chicken and said nothing. I did not mention that Elena's boyfriend works in fraud prevention at the bank, because the quickest way to make a person test offense is to say how strong it is. After dinner, when the kids were playing with the magnet tiles on the floor, Michael followed me into the kitchen. You know, I would never do anything to hurt you. I know you wouldn't intend to, I said. That's not what I said. He tapped the granite with his wedding ring, a habit he picked up when he quit smoking. I heard you, I said. You should hear me. And then I put the pen in the drawer and closed it with a gentle click. A clear sound, like shutting a door that still hangs true on its hinges. 2 days later, a moving truck crawled up my street. The driver backed into my driveway like a man who had practiced in an empty lot. I answered the door with my apron still on. He smiled, handed me a clipboard, and said, Ma'am, we're here for the downsizing. What downsizing? I asked. He read the order. The client's name was mine. The note said, remove bedroom set, dining table, kitchenware, and box labeled taxes. He rubbed the back of his neck. It says children arranged. Is that you? It is not, I said. He apologized 3 times and left with his truck, and my hands shook for the first time since this began. I called Claire. The box labeled taxes, she repeated. They're sloppy. Sloppier than I predicted. What now? And I asked. We call Adult Protective Services before they do, she said. We get a case file open on possible exploitation so that if they call to accuse you of neglecting yourself, the investigator already knows your name. And the truth attached to it, the woman from APS had a strong face and sensible earrings. She sat at my kitchen table and drank the tea I made. She looked at my pantry, my medication list, the calendar where I'd written Lila's recital and Ben's dentist appointment. She checked the dates on my smoke detector batteries because procedures make the world fair. She checked the camera over the door and nodded when I told her why I'd put it there. You're not the first, she said quietly. She called Claire the next day to say my case would be noted as concern for financial exploitation by immediate family, client competent and self-sufficient, no neglect. It was a dry paragraph that felt like a fence post hammered deep into the ground. Michael came by less. When he did, he tested me like a doctor who hasn't read the chart. Do you remember the name of your elementary school? He asked one afternoon while tightening a screw at the base of my banister. Yes, I said, and supplied it. And the president? I know the president. He laughed a small, embarrassed laugh. I'm just teasing. No, I said. Yeah, you're measuring. There's a difference. The following week, during Lila's piano recital, Victoria leaned in as I took my seat. "You look tired," she murmured. "You should let us take you home after." "My son is playing the second half," I said. "I intend to stay." "Then at least let me hold your purse," she said, her hand already on the strap. I kept my grip. Her fingers were cool. "No, thank you." She smiled her careful smile. "I'm only trying to help." "I know," I said softly, because I had learned that telling the truth sometimes sounds like kindness. 2 nights later, my bank called again. A transfer had been attempted from my savings to an account nicknamed Family Fund. The amount was $49,000, just under the threshold that triggers some automatic alerts. The bank held it for confirmation. "I did not authorize that," I said, and then I signed the forms at the branch to file a fraud report. Elena's boyfriend, Miles, walked past at the right moment and extended a hand. "Nice to meet you in person, Ms. Hart," he said, and gave me a subtle nod. In the parking lot, I sat in my car a long time, hands on the steering wheel, listening to pigeons clatter into the rafters. Claire filed for a temporary restraining order against unauthorized access to my accounts and property, attaching the attempted transfer, the moving truck order, and transcripts from Sparrow. The judge signed it the next morning. The paper felt absurdly light for something that could stop a truck. The order made them act. You could feel the urgency, like the pressure in the air before a thunderstorm. Michael and Victoria arrived together late that afternoon. No grandkids, just the two of them carrying that manila folder and their certainty. "I wish you'd called," I said, but they were already inside. Michael closed the door behind them silently. Victoria set the folder on the table with the care of a person delivering a meal to a stranger. Polite, but distant. "We're worried about you," she said. "You're making rash decisions." "I've always been decisive," I said. "It's one of my charms." "This is not a joke, Mom." Michael's voice had the edge I recognize from his worst days at work. "The bank is being difficult. The lawyer you hired is taking advantage of you. You're paying fees you don't need to pay." "I'm paying to keep my life my own. Your life is our life," he said, as if that were the sweetest thing he could say. "I know," I said, "and that's why I'm not handing it to you to hold for me." He opened the folder and slid out the papers. I made a small show of patting my sweater for my glasses. Then I looked at him over the rims of the spare readers I'd hooked in my pocket. He blinked. Victoria did not. She watched me like a chess clock. "Let me see the first page," I said. He handed it to me. It was a power of attorney set, drafted by an online service. My name was spelled correctly, at least. The witness's lines were blank. The notary line was blank. The effective clause was immediate, not springing, no trigger like a doctor's letter. I let my finger rest on that line as if I'd fallen asleep there. Then I turned the page. "Did you draft these?" I asked. "We had help," Victoria said. "Who?" She named a colleague of hers who'd used the same website for a parent last year, a friend of a friend, a story made of air. "I see," I said. "And where would you take me if I signed?" They glanced at each other. That unison, that quick flicker of eyes, told me everything that the paragraphs did not. "Downstairs," Michael said, "until we find the right place." The right place. I pictured my basement, my holiday boxes, my old desk, the bat I kept behind the water heater because my father had kept one behind his. I pictured a narrow bed and a lock high on the outside of the door for the children's safety. The kettle clicked off. The house fell quiet the way it falls quiet right before an alarm goes off. "No," I said, and I did not raise my voice. "I will not sign. And you will not come into my home without calling in advance, and you will not request services in my name without my permission." "You can't stop us from trying to help," Michael said. He reached for the paperwork, like a man who knows the end of a play, but refuses to accept there are no more lines. "Here's the part you didn't see," I said, and tapped the tie pin. "You've been on the record. Everything you have said and done in this kitchen in the last month has been recorded." His face changed. Not a flinch, but a small recalculation, like a man realizing a stair is shorter than he remembered and adjusting mid-step. Victoria's chin lifted a quarter inch. Recording without consent is illegal, she said. Not in this state, not in my home, and not when the other party knows there's a camera at the back door. Claire is ready to file. Michael stared at me. It was a look I've seen only a few times, the look he gave the day his father told him he could not borrow the car, the look when his first girlfriend broke up with him and he did not understand it was not a puzzle to solve. I am not the enemy, he said. Then act like a son, I said, feeling the ache in my ribs. Not a collector. They left, their backs stiff. I leaned against the counter after they were gone and let my breath go out of me in a long, thin line. The house hummed. A sparrow skittered on the icy railing of the porch. The tie pin felt heavy for the first time. A week later, the petition arrived. It came by certified mail, thick enough to thud. Petition for guardianship in the matter of Margaret Ann Hart, an incapacitated person. They checked the box for temporary guardianship, citing imminent financial risk. They attached an affidavit listing the stove and various confusions, and one line so absurd I almost laughed. Ms. Hart has begun to associate with strangers who claim to be legal counsel. Claire's response was precise. We asked for a hearing at the earliest date. We petitioned for dismissal with sanctions. We attached our own exhibits, the bank's fraud hold, the moving truck order, transcripts from Sparrow to Doctor, Rao's letter, and a copy of the trust. I'd prefer to end this before court, Claire said. But they've thrown a match on dry grass. The weeks before the hearing felt like living above a theater. You could hear sets being built beneath you, voices practicing their scripts. The kids still came over, but always on my terms. Victoria dropped them at the curb and waved from the car. Lila asked why. I told her we were practicing independence, and she wrinkled her nose and accepted the explanation with the generosity of 10-year-olds. One evening, Ben found the old chess set Richard used to bring out on rainy afternoons. Teach me, he said. We sat at the table and moved the pieces. He played the knights like checkers, hopping, laughing. You can't do that, I said, and showed him, and he frowned and then smiled when he understood. As he reached for a pawn, he brushed the tie pin. That's Grandpa's, he said, and I nodded. He tapped it softly, 2 tiny knocks. You can hear it? He asked. I can, I said. It makes me listen. The night before the hearing, I slept halfway and then woke. I made tea in the dark and watched steam curl like a thought trying to rise. My hands were steady. I packed a small bag, not because I believed anyone would take me anywhere, but because I know life likes to pretend it's unpredictable, when in fact it sends you exactly where you've already set your feet. The courthouse smelled of paper and winter coats. Claire walked beside me, and we did not talk much because we had said everything we needed to say already. Michael and Victoria were outside the courtroom, whispering. He looked white around the mouth. She wore a suit the color of unripe pears. We did not greet each other. There is a way to preserve love without encouraging harm. It looks a lot like silence. The judge was a woman with gray hair pulled back into a smooth tail, her glasses low on her nose. She started on time. She read the petition title and looked at me and then at my son. We will begin with petitioners, she said. Their lawyer, a man with a voice like sand, stood and spoke. He told a careful story that did not sound like a lie, even though it was constructed out of omissions. He mentioned my age and grief. He mentioned the stove. He mentioned an outsider attorney he suggested was harvesting fees. He did not mention the moving truck. When it was Claire's turn, she stood as if her spine were a ruler. Your Honor, she said, we will be brief. Miss Hart is competent, independent, and the target of a financial exploitation attempt by family members under color of concern. We request dismissal with prejudice and sanctions for frivolous filing. We also request a protective order prohibiting further attempts to move or manage Ms. Hart's property without her consent. The judge nodded. Evidence? Claire called Doctor. Rao first. The doctor's voice did not waver. She described my evaluation. She did not editorialize. Competent, she said. No evidence of cognitive impairment. Then the bank manager, who wore his tie too tight and kept clearing his throat. He described the attempted transfer to Family Fund and the steps the bank took. He described the conversation he had with Michael the week prior when Michael attempted to clarify certain security questions. Michael's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. The bank manager continued, sweating, honest. Then Claire played the recordings. The court speaker system made Sparrow's audio larger than life, like guardrails clanging, Michael's voice, Victoria's voice, the clink of ice. Their plans sounded so small, set against the room's high ceilings. Victoria's lawyer objected to the recording. Claire cited the statute. The judge nodded. Proceed. When the clip of the burner ran, Claire paused it at the sentence that mattered. I thought maybe she'd blink and just accept it. I do not have time for her to come to her senses. The words hung like wire. Michael stared at the table. Victoria looked at the judge and not at me. Claire called me last. Do you want to make a statement? She asked. I stood and put my hand on the rail because I am not proud. I raised a good boy, I said. I did my best. Grief is a poor teacher. I am competent, Your Honor. I am not confused. I bake bread. I pay my bills. I know what day it is. I love my grandchildren and hope they love me back. I am not an incapacitated person. I am a person with eyes and ears who sees what's being asked of her and is saying no. The judge asked 2 questions. They were not trick questions. What were my monthly expenses? What prescriptions did I take and how often? I answered them. My voice did not shake. The judge looked down at the papers for a long time. The quiet in the courtroom was like a sheet of clear water. Petition denied, she said finally in a voice that did not gloat. Dismissed with prejudice. The court finds no evidence of incapacitation. The court further finds evidence of attempted financial exploitation by petitioners under guise of guardianship. Sanctions are appropriate. Counsel for respondent will submit a draft order. Petitioners are admonished that further interference with Ms. Hart's property or person will result in referral to the district attorney's office. She banged her gavel once. People in the gallery breathed. Claire put a hand briefly on my elbow, the touch of a good captain after docking a boat. Michael rose. For a second, a fraction, he looked like the boy who used to cut my roses and present them to me stem by stem. He took a step, and his lawyer touched his sleeve. He stopped. Victoria gathered her bag and left without turning her head. Her heels ticked out a cold rhythm on the stone floor. Outside, the air had the thin, victorious chill of March that makes you forget March can still be cruel. I sat on the bench by the heavy doors. Claire made 2 calls. Elena texted a small explosion of hearts and knives, an odd combination, but accurate. Now what? I asked. Now we secure, Claire said, and we decide what kind of victory you want. There are victories that cost too much. I did not want the police to take my son's weathered hands and press them onto a cold car. I wanted something that made a stronger lesson and a quieter home. Protective order, I said, and the trust. We amended the trust to remove any successor trustees who shared blood with me. We replaced them with the corporate trustee and Elena, in that order. We added a clause. Any heir who petitions for my guardianship without a physician's declaration of incapacity is deemed to have predeceased me for purposes of inheritance. It was not spite. It was architecture. Then, a choice. What to do for the children. I set up 2 education funds with the trustee. They were structured to benefit Lila and Ben, and only Lila and Ben, whatever addresses their mailboxes might show in later years. The funds could not be touched by parents, lawyers, or family funds. They would pay for books and braces, and if the kids wanted it, college, trade school, or a set of tools for a trade. Claire filed the protective order. The judge signed it with the same pen she'd used to sign the dismissal. This one prohibited Michael and Victoria from accessing my accounts, my house, or my medical information without my consent. It also prohibited third-party vendors from acting on their requests. I changed the code on the garage. I put a sign inside the front window that said politely, "Solicitors by appointment only." It was a little joke to myself, though I know I promise not to make jokes at times like these. Some jokes are private. They hold a person up under a heavy thing. Weeks went by. The air warmed. Crocuses shouldered their way through soil like small miracles that didn't need anyone to sign for them. The kids came in the middle of the week after school sometimes, arranged through Elena. "Mom's busy," Lila would say brightly, a line fed to her, and then ask for hot chocolate. We never spoke of it in front of them. Love has more rules than chess. One afternoon, Lila watched me noodle a melody on the piano. "Grandma?" she asked. "Are you mad at Daddy?" "I am sad at Daddy," I said. Sad is a color that changes under the light. I hope it fades. She nodded, considering tying and retying her shoelace. "I will tell him you are sad," she said. "He listens to me sometimes." "Thank you," I said. A month later, the phone rang. Michael. His voice was smaller. "Can we talk?" "We can talk at Claire's office," I said, with the door open. He hesitated and then agreed. When he arrived, he looked like a man who had been visited by several consequences. He sat on his hands. Claire didn't offer to shake his. We keep some courtesies as a map in unknown territory. We drop others for safety. "I'm sorry," he said. "This got out of hand." "This began out of hand," I said. He nodded. "I don't know how to say this without it sounding like an excuse." "Try with the truth," Claire said. "It's faster." He told us about the investment he'd made, small at first, then not small. A fund his old college friend swore by that turned out to be less of a fund and more of a pond you toss money into where it does not make a sound. He told us about the consulting business Victoria had started that had eaten money like paper in a wastebasket fire. He told us about the credit lines, plural, and the way a step you take to fix something can put your foot on a staircase you did not intend to climb. "You wanted the trust," I said, not a question. "I wanted time," he said, "and then I wanted the trust." His mouth shook. "I told myself it was for you." Because of the stove, because of the bank calls, I told myself I was being a good son. I heard myself. I knew I was lying while I was saying it. Claire watched him as if she were measuring the distance between 2 points. "We won't pursue criminal charges if you meet the conditions Ms. Hart will set," she said. "But if you breach them, we will." I set them. They were not cruel. He would not come to my house without a scheduled time and my approval. He would not request, suggest, or hint at any change to my finances. He would attend counseling with a person who understood why some adult children treat their parents like insurance policies. He would sign an acknowledgement that any future petition against my capacity would disinherit him under the trust. He would write a letter in his own hand to Lila and Ben, explaining that what he did was wrong and that their grandmother's choices were hers and theirs to respect. The letter would stay in Claire's file unless needed. He agreed. He signed. He cried, a sound I remembered from when he was 7 and broke his arm. I did not reach for him. That is the hardest part of being a mother sometimes. The place where love ends and enabling begins is thinner than a pane of old glass. Victoria did not come. Victoria sent an email through her lawyer demanding a meeting next week to revisit the guardianship conversation in light of new developments. We did not respond. Silence is a reply. For a while, quiet returned. I weeded the beds. I swept the garage. I replaced a cracked tile by the stove with a wiser one. Elena and I spent a morning going through the old photo albums and taping the corners that had come loose. We found a picture of Michael at 12, kneeling on the floor, playing chess with Richard, both their heads bent toward the board. Elena held it up to the sun so the paper glowed. "He is still in there," she said. "I know," I said, "but I am in here too." On a Thursday in June, the doorbell rang. A delivery man with a bouquet the size of a bass drum stood grinning on the step. "For Miss Hart," he said. There was a note tucked into the roses. Not from Michael, not from Victoria. From someone named Jason. "Thank you for trusting us with your new home," it read, in a loopy handwriting that liked itself. "We'll have you downsized in no time. See you Monday at 9 a.m. I called the number. A cheerful voice answered. "We have a contract," he said, signed by the owner. "Estate downsizing, whole house, I am the owner," I said, "and I signed nothing." "Then someone used your name," he said more carefully. "I have a deposit." I asked him to email the paperwork. He did. The signature was mine. It was my name in my slant, the cross on the T of my maiden name the way I make it when I'm in a hurry, even though I haven't used that name in 50 years. There were details only a person who watched me sign many things would know. My face flushed in a way that had nothing to do with blood pressure. Claire traced the deposit. It came from an account Victoria managed for her consulting business. We filed a police report. Fraud moves slowly until it doesn't. We were still sitting at Claire's conference table when my phone buzzed with a message from Lila. "Grandma, can we come over? Mom is crying." "Not today," Claire said gently, and took the phone and typed the reply for me. The next 7 days were a choreography of calls and quiet. The police visited Victoria. She denied everything and then suggested Michael had acted on his own and forged her name as well as mine. Michael, to his credit, told the detective the truth. He had not known about the downsizing order. He had not authorized it. He had begged Victoria to stop. He had slept on his friend's couch for 2 nights. He had understood that consequences arrive in pairs, the public ones and the private ones. The district attorney did not press charges immediately. The protective order grew teeth. The judge assigned a special master to review any requests made in my name by anyone other than me. It was like watching a stagehand pull the curtain just a little further closed on a play that had already ended. Victoria sent one more email, this time to me directly, a long letter that tried on the costume of apology but kept showing its seams. In the middle of it, a line glittered, "We both know you're not the same since Richard died." A sentence made like a hook. I answered with one sentence, "I am not the same, but I am still myself." That summer, Lila and Ben and I built a small raised bed for salad greens. We watered in the evenings when the sun gave up its harshness. Ben liked the way water makes a small music when it leaves a can. Lila liked the neatness of a row. We did not talk about upstairs or downstairs or documents. We talked about roots. I said that roots are smart. They know how to find what they need in the dark, and that finding is not a failure. It is how they live. In August, Michael asked if he could come by. He wore a shirt I remembered buying him when he was too old for me to buy him things. He stood on the step like a boy again, hands visible, soft eyes. "Can we sit?" he asked. We sat at the table. He looked at the tie pin and then away. "We're separating," he said. It was not pity I felt. It was the flat relief of a long-held breath let out at last. "I'm sorry," I said, "because separation is a kind of surgery, and people bleed." "I'm moving to a small place near the kids' school," he said. "I'll split custody." We put the house on the market. He swallowed. I told them the truth. Not everything, but the truth. "What did you tell them?" "That I made a mistake," he said simply. "That I tried to take something that wasn't mine to take. That you stopped me. That you were right." We sat with that. The kitchen was brighter than it had been in months. "What do you want from me?" I asked finally. "I want you to meet me here," he said, and tapped the table, the wood scarred by 100 dinners and one fell-potted plant. "At your table, as my mother, not as my judge. I can't separate them entirely," I said, "but I can try." He nodded. We made a schedule for visits. We kept it small and kept it steady. The kids adjusted, as kids do, with a wisdom that isn't fair to ask of them, but which they perform anyway because they love their lives more than they love any of our stories about them. Autumn arrived like a blessing. Apples that thudded in the bowl when you set them down, sweaters that remembered the shape of your shoulders, the long light that makes ordinary streets look like they are thinking. I began teaching a short workshop at the library on organizing paperwork for widows and widowers. I called it Keeping Your Hands on the Wheel. People came, they nodded, they took notes like I did, with seriousness and relief. I told them what, doctor? Rao told me that comfort with facts is a form of care. In November, Claire and I finalized one more thing, a letter to myself to be opened if I ever did become confused. It was kind and specific. It said that the woman who wrote it loved the woman who would read it and had made choices to keep her safe. It said that Elena would be my helper and that Michael would be my son and that these two facts were not in competition. I sealed it and put it in the top drawer. On my next birthday, I baked a lemon cake. I put the candles in myself. Michael came with the kids. Elena came with a plant I had admired and then forgotten. We ate. We watched a small video of Lila's art show. We listened to Ben practice his reading with the formal dignity he brings to all tasks. Michael did not reach for any papers. He did not reach for my glasses. He took the plates to the sink because we both knew where they were and always had been. After they left, I stood at the window and took a breath that filled me to the base of my lungs. The house glowed in the way houses do when they are pleased with their owners. I unpinned the tie bar and held it in my palm. "Thank you," I said. And though I know a person cannot thank an object, what I was really doing was thanking my own attention and Richard's steady hand and the part of me that refused to be treated like a problem in need of a signature. My son took my glasses because he thought vision was a lens. It is not. It is a line we lay from who we were to who we will be, and then we walk it. I see further than he thought because I have been walking that line a very long time. And if you have followed me this far, you can see it too. The way a life can be defended without being destroyed, the way a mother can keep loving and still say no. To understand how it all happened, I had to go back to the beginning. To keep living, I learned to see past the papers on a table to the hands that slid them there, and to my own hands, steady, firm, still mine.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.